Hi, everybody. This is Sam Rubley with MIS Consulting and Sales. I am here with Mike Chrisman from Epicor Software. Today, we're going to be doing an Epicor corporate overview of E10. So as we get started, I wanted to let you know you are all on mute. Please go ahead and use the chat if you'd like to ask any questions. Otherwise, we will definitely follow up at the end of the presentation in person over email. We will be beginning our agenda, and I put this out here for you to look at. Typically, this is my agenda for an Epicor presentation, and you can see it goes 4 hours. Yes, we cover a overview of Epicor in 4 hours. However, today we will ratchet this down into 1 hour. Mike is going to summarize a few things. We won't be going into in-depth detail in every area, but as a follow-up, we would be happy to do a deeper dive into the E10 application. And there are just a slew of features and functions for us to take a look at. So let me just do a quick overview of Epicor as the company. Epicor is all about growing your business and not your software. And really what that means is you may start with Epicor and have 5 users, but it will grow with you. It's got so much flexibility to it. You can add more users, you can add more modules, you can take advantage of features that you couldn't take advantage of with your initial implementation. So Epicor, we see many of our clients that are on the application for decades. We actually have some on here, yes, for decades. So let me move down to next, Epicor at a glance. Epicor has over 20,000 customers, 3,800 employees worldwide, 150 companies, and over $1 billion in revenue. And while this might seem like I'm bragging, it's really just to let you know that Epicor is a strong company that backs this application, and we're constantly enhancing it, and our enhancements come from our customer input. The industry focus for Epicor is wide. It's manufacturing at its core, covering different areas of manufacturing, and then we move into distribution, retail, and services. We talked about some next generation solutions. Epicor, being that big company that puts a lot of energy into their software application, is always on the latest and greatest technology based on Microsoft.NET and so forth, but our deployments are flexible. So you can either have it on-premise, you could have it in the cloud, or you could have a hybrid where it's an on-premise solution hosted in somebody else's facility so you don't have to worry about taking care of a server and so forth. Now, MIS Consulting has been exclusively an Epicor partner since 1987. That means we've been around for a really, really long time. We have regional, national, and global clients. We have offices across the United States as well. Our headquarters are in Portland, Oregon. So as a channel partner at the platinum level, we have a certified staff that handles project management. We have deep experience in implementation and technical skills as well. And finally, as I wrap up my PowerPoint, because we want to get to the good stuff, growing with Epicor with a trusted vendor, cutting-edge technology, and a quick return on investment are just a few of the things that you'll be getting when you move forward with Epicor software. This is a snippet of all of the modules within the Epicor suite, and I'm going to pass the ball over to Mike to do a high-level overview of the features and functions of Epicor. Okay, Michael, it is all yours.
All right, thank you, Pam. So my name is Mike Chrisman. I'm going to be performing the rest of the demo from this point forward. I work for Epicor ERP. I've been with Epicor for around 3 years, and I've been in the manufacturing ERP industry for over 15 years. And what I hope to do for the next hour now is give you an introduction to Epicor ERP. And I have planned for our agenda today basically 2 main things that I want to do. One is in the introduction overview, I have 3 main topics that I want to cover. I want to talk about the concept of navigating through the system, introduce you to how to navigate through the ERP system. I want to talk about the concept of accessing information, and I want to share with you some of the things that set Epicor apart when it comes to finding information in your system. And then I finally want to talk about alerts and automation and how you can leverage the technology in the system to provide an alerting mechanism when certain conditional things occur in your system, and to introduce automation into your system, right, and reduce the number of clicks and automate certain functions. And then finally, if we have time, I'd like to go into a quick quote to job flow where we might create a quick quote, turn it into an order, and plan and schedule a job. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So in the interest of introducing you guys to navigating through Epicor ERP, let me introduce you first to what you're looking at here. This is called the active home screen. So each user that logs into Epicor ERP is going to have their own personal home screen, kind of like you see here. Epicor comes with a number of these home screens already built in. So like, for example, I might have my executive layout, my finance layout. And if I scroll down a little further, you see you have a manufacturing layout. So there's certain layouts that are going to come with this system, and you're going to be able to use those layouts and also modify those and create your own. So notice in this case, I'm going to switch over to the finance layout. So you could imagine, dependent upon the role of the user, whether that user's, working in the sales department or the production department or the finance department, they're going to be able to create and maintain their own role-based dashboard, right? I'm going to come back and set it back to my favorite home page here. So you can toggle between those dashboards, have multiple active home screens available to you, and you can edit those. So notice I'm going to click over here on the right-hand side, and I'm going to edit my dashboard. And you notice I have a series of options here where I can manipulate my dashboard, my home screen. Notice I'm going to come in here and maybe remove this image here. And then maybe I'm going to add something instead. I'm going to add a discovery chart here, one of my EDD tiles. And I think the one I'm going to grab is my quote win-loss analysis here. And so notice I can pick that item out, put that right on my active home screen here, and I can come and resize the items as I see fit. But notice as I go ahead and save that, I've now added that additional chart element right here to my dashboard. And you'll notice that I can actually drill down and interrogate this detail here. So if I drill into this particular chart, notice I'm looking at, open sales orders by different customer groups. Maybe I want to look at that a little bit differently. Maybe I want to look at that by customer. So notice I'll come in here, maybe look at that data that way. Maybe I want to come in, and look at it by part number here. So you notice how I'm just starting to come in and visualize my data and interact with my data. Notice if I click here, and I can actually drill right down into the transactions that are making up those chart elements. Notice I'll come back to my active home screen. I want to draw your attention over here to the left-hand side of the screen where I have my menu options. Notice if I click here, I can actually navigate through the system using my menu. I can also create my own favorites, so another method of personalizing my active home screen with my favorite options. And then the system's going to keep track of the screens that I go into most recently, so I can get to those more quickly. Notice I'm going to drill right now into the menu, and you start to see the sales module, the production management modules, the financial management module. So remember that Epicor ERP for manufacturing has the sales, the CRM, the production, the financial data, all in one single system, right? Notice I'm going to click into sales. Maybe I'll come into CRM, and I'll come into order entry. So notice I can click and open up order entry, or notice over here on the right-hand side, I could add that to my favorites or add it to my home screen. So you could imagine as you find all your favorite screens and reports and options within this menu, you add those items to your favorites list here like I've done, or add those items to your home screen like I've done here, so that you can open up those menu items more easily. Now, notice as I open up this sales order entry screen, and I'm going to bring up one of my more recent orders. Notice I'm searching on my orders. I'm going to bring up this order here. All of the entry screens have the same look and feel. You're going to see entry screens throughout the demo today. Like, for example, you might see quote entry for preparing a quote. You might see sales order entry like we're looking at now for booking an order, right? Job entry for planning and scheduling jobs and issuing travelers and things of that nature. Invoice entry for issuing invoices. So in this case, I'm looking at order entry, and I want to make the point that all the entry screens have the same look and feel. They're all going to consist of your option menus at the top, or you can come down, file new, right, and create a new order. Come over here, actions, and print out your order, things of that nature. You'll also see, of course, your toolbar functions here as well. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see a tree structure. So notice my order is broken down into the line item detail and attachments here on the left-hand side. I can navigate through the order details in that tree, but I can also navigate through the order details on the right-hand side in the form itself. And in this form is where you actually see the business data, like the customer ID, the ship date, etc. Now, I want to make the point that all of these screens in Epicor come a certain way out of the box, right? But inevitably, all of my customers want to personalize their system, right? This is one of the strengths of Epicor. There's a built-in best practice workflow, right? Quote turns into a sales order, turns into a job, turns into a shipment, turns into an invoice, right? Which most of your businesses are going to follow that flow more or less. But every business has their own nuanced way of doing business. And so everybody wants to kind of tweak the best practice workflow that's built in to support their unique business. So all of the screens can be personalized. So for example, if you want to rearrange the way the screens look, or if you want to add or remove fields from the screen and change the functionality of the screens and the system, you can do that. You can personalize the system. So there's tools built in to personalize these screens beyond what you get out of the box. Notice I'm going to hit the F1 key at the moment, context sensitive F1 key. So, you know, it assumes that I'm in the sales order entry screen. It assumes I need help with sales orders. So it takes me to that portion of the help. But of course, I can search the help like chapters in a book. You know, I can keyword search the help and use the hyperlinks within the help to navigate through those help items. I'll show you one other example of the help here. I'm going to come into my field level help. And as you guys are becoming familiar with your new system, this can be quite handy. A lot of my customers enjoy this. Notice as I click from field to field, the field help highlights for me the specific business case for that particular field, why that field is there, right? And from a technical level, if I wanted to incorporate that field into my dashboards or reports, I can understand, you know, the table name, the field name that coincide with that particular field here. Okay. So now that you get a sense of kind of how to navigate through the system, I want to switch gears and talk about this concept of accessing information, right? Because in my experience, any system allows you to enter a quote, enter an order, enter a job. But I find where a lot of these systems separate themselves is where it comes to finding information. And Epicor does this particularly well. Notice I'm going to come into my enterprise search. So this is like a Google search for my entire system and all my business data. You know, imagine in a scenario, my customer is calling me on the phone, and maybe I'm typing his name, maybe I'm typing the customer's name, right? Or whatever piece of information I may have gathered. And notice I'm looking up that information against my entire system. So in this case, I entered my customer's name, and notice I've returned actually pages and pages of records that have been returned here. In fact, if you look over at the tag cloud, you'll see that because this is a customer, you know, they have a tendency to have placed orders with me. I have a tendency to have shipped product to them. You know, I have a tendency to have invoiced them for services rendered. I'm going to click on orders. Maybe the customer's calling about a particular order. So notice now I say, Mr. Customer, I've got all of your orders, you know, right in front of me. Which order is it that you're calling about in particular? Notice I'm going to switch to the grid view here and get what I like to think is more of a traditional view of the data. And again, I'm looking at all the orders for my customer Addison here. Of course, notice from the grid view, I can right click, I could group this data, summarize this data, filter this data down to find that particular order that I'm looking for, right? Summarize on any of these columns, filter on any of these columns, or group by on any of these columns. I could even, you know, if my customer said, hey, can you send me a list of those orders that I've placed with you? You know, if it's appropriate, copy that right out to Excel and send them that list of orders really quickly here. You know, maybe I say to my customer, hey, you know, you got to be more specific. We've done a lot of business over the years. You know, maybe can you give me the PO number that goes with your order here? Maybe that'll help us find it here. So notice I'm now taking an additional piece of information, and I'll switch this back to classic view. Notice as I put in that PO number, it obviously found that order straight away. Now in this case, I'm going to right click, drill down into that order. So notice I'm opening the order in the sales order tracker screen, and now I'm going to study the details of those orders. So, you know, I'm saying, hey, Mr. Customer, I've located your order, and I can see the status of this in terms of you having ordered these line item details here. Notice line item number 1 is closed. And he says, well, what do you mean it's closed? I don't remember receiving those products. You notice I'm going to come over to my shipping details, and I can see that there's a shipper related to this sales order. I'm going to right click, open with, drill down now into the shipping record, right? And I say, Mr. Customer, you know, here I've got the shipping record in front of me. I can see it's shipped on the 14th. And in fact, I can even track that package for us here. You know, and I can see that so-and-so signed for that particular package, right? And furthermore, not only do I see they signed for it, but I can see that you've been invoiced for that particular shipment. So notice I'm going to right-click, drill down, and I'm going to now open up the invoice details, right? Of course, the customer's saying, well, gee, I don't remember getting that package, and furthermore, I don't even remember getting the invoice. And notice at this stage, I'm going to print, fax, or email the invoice off to the customer. We'll choose the option to go ahead and email that invoice to the customer. And as that prepares, I'm going to open up my email, and we'll see what that might look like. And so notice what Epicor will do for us. It will do a number of things here. It'll prepare that email for us, send that email out to our customer, you know, and attach to that email the particular invoice and perhaps even some verbiage. So notice how it's done all of that in an automated fashion here. Here you can see in my outbox or inbox, you know, that particular email with that attachment. When you look at this invoice attachment here, this PDF invoice printout, this is an example of a report out of the system. You know, Epicor comes with, you know, hundreds of these standard reports, SSRS reports. All of those reports can be modified. Inevitably, my customers will modify those and incorporate their logo, their branding, and or, you know, rearrange how the data is displayed. Okay. So, you know, don't forget what we did there. We drilled down. We used our enterprise search to locate a sales order via a PO, and we drilled from that order to the shipment and to the invoice, as all those documents are linked to one another in one single embedded system, right? Notice as I close my shipment, I'm back at my sales order, or close my order, I'm back at my enterprise search. Imagine the customer says, hey, thanks for answering that question, and I got that invoice in my inbox, but I've got some other questions. Notice I'm going to right-click and open up the customer tracker. And so from here, I can bring up Addison, my customer's file, and I can basically access all of their history right here from one screen. So, you know, as we're looking at Addison here in their, basically as we brought up their account file, you know, I can come in here and access all of their, you know, invoice history. I can come in here and access all of their payment history. You know, I could come in and access their aging history. Now, keep in mind that all of this data access is all security driven. The system's totally security driven. So you're going to determine what users have access to what data, right? You're going to determine based on their role, you know, what screens they can get into, what reports they can run, what fields they can see and even edit, right? So you're going to determine down to the field level what level of access each and every one of your users has to the system. But notice what I'm doing here from the customer tracker, all of my quotes that I've done with that customer, all the orders I've ever booked with that customer, you know, all the times I've ever shipped product to them, or all the jobs where I've ever produced a product for them. All of those transactions that I've done over the years with my customer are all able to be accessed here from one single screen. And imagine as I'm looking at this grid of data, remember I can right-click, open with, drill down, right-click, group by, summarize, filter, right-click, copy this data to Excel. Okay. Hopefully everybody's still tracking with me so far. So in the interest of finding information, I want to switch gears and talk about dashboards for a moment, right? So here I've got some example dashboards that I prepared for today's presentation. And here I'm going to bring up my first example. I call this a billings bookings backlog. Epicor comes with a number of these dashboards out of the box, but you're inevitably going to modify those dashboards. You're going to create your own. In this case, I've got a dashboard I've created, and I've incorporated 4 different quadrants here. And I want to highlight, notice in this particular quadrant, I'm happen to be showing, invoicing data from the AR, accounts receivable, finance side of the house. Notice over here, I happen to be showing sales order data, from the sales side of the house. Over here on the right-hand side, I'm showing shipping information, from the production side, from fulfillment or warehouse side of the house. But the point I like to make here is with a single embedded system, remember all your sales, your production, your finance data is all in one single system. It's easy for me to create a single dashboard and incorporate multiple elements of the business in one dashboard, right? I'm incorporating some data elements from finance, from sales, from production, all in one single dashboard that I can interact with, right click, drill down, group by, summarize, filter, copy that data to Excel. I'll close this for a moment. I want to share with you another dashboard. This one here I call my quote funnel. Just happens to be some open quotes that I'm tracking here. One of the main things that I like to highlight here on this particular dashboard is this concept of updatable dashboards. So notice how in this case, I can come in and update these fields almost just like as if it was a spreadsheet. So notice how quickly I'm coming in here and updating these expected close dates just right within the grid here, right? Imagine how quickly I'm updating these confidence factors, right here within the grid. So in lieu of, opening and changing each individual quote, notice how I'm updating those multiple quote records right within the grid. Another thing that I'm going to show here is notice if I right-click, copy this data out to Excel, let's say I wanted to apply some sort of formula here, and I'm just going to drag this down. Imagine I apply my date formula like thus, or maybe I want to apply a formula against these values here. But notice I want to update a large number of records very quickly here. I'm going to basically copy these changes, and watch what I'm going to do is right click and I'm going to paste update right here. So within the grid, I'm actually going to update these values straight away from Excel. So don't blink because you'll miss it as I click here. Notice how quickly that's gone ahead and updated all those values. So very powerful, popular feature that can be quite useful and save you a tremendous amount of time when used in the proper time. Notice I'm going to close this guy for a moment. I'll share with you a couple of other dashboards. In this case, the job cost exception. The thing I want to highlight here is this concept of managed by exception, right? And how this can make it easier to find information, actionable information. In this case, I happen to be looking at a bunch of open jobs, right? But notice I've colorized the grid. So I've used some conditional logic. And so within the system, you can apply simple if-then conditional rules to say, hey, in this case, I said, if this actual cost of the job exceeds the estimate, I want you to highlight it red, right? If the actual material cost exceeds the estimated material, I want you to make it red, right? Highlight that for me. If my estimated completion is over a certain threshold, make it red, right? So basically add some conditional logic to say, show me where the problem areas are, right? Show me the exceptions to the rule. Show me where things are not going well, right? So I can focus my efforts on correcting those particular scenarios. So in this case, again, if I see some issue with this particular job, I might right click, open with, drill down into that particular job. And here I'm going to highlight another really nice feature of Epicor is what we call publish subscribe. So imagine I'm going to open this job in the job tracker, and notice I'll study the details of the job in the job tracker. But imagine And here I'm going to try to put these side by side for a moment. Imagine I want to kind of study, through this list of jobs. Notice as I click on each individual job, notice the screen behind, and this really works particularly well if you have dual monitors, but notice my job tracker behind there is updating to display the details as they relate to that particular job. So notice as I click on an individual job in the list, in the job cost exception on the bottom left, notice how it's displaying those particular job details in the screen on the right. So you can imagine it's a really effective way to have multiple screens open and be able to review, a large amount of data very quickly. Notice I'm going to click on these other tabs here. Again, in the vein of the manage by exception concept. In this case, notice I'm only returning records that satisfy certain conditions, right? I'm only returning jobs that are over the material estimate. I'm only returning jobs that are over the labor estimate. So, again, just another example how you're going to create these dashboards to have conditional logic to only return data when certain conditions exist. So a really wonderful way of managing by exception and also facilitating workflow and those sorts of things. I'll close this for a moment. I want to share with you one last dashboard. And here I've got a dashboard. It happens to be a supplier relationship management type dashboard. And notice again, a lot of the concepts I've explained earlier are incorporated here. For example, the publish, subscribe. So notice as I click on a particular customer, that particular customer's details are displaying on the bottom half of that dashboard, right? So as I click on that customer, I'm going to be able to see, their particular on-time performance. Notice as I, am aware of their on-time performance, I might come in here, and regrade them accordingly. So again, I'm using my updatable dashboards here. And the other point I like to make as I'm looking at this particular dashboard is, a lot of my customers are putting these dashboards on big screen televisions these days, right? And so you can do that. Put these dashboards on a big screen TV. These are live real-time data. So up to the second information that's refreshing, throughout the day and giving you real-time information, what's happening out in the shop or in the business. Not only are people wanting to, put these dashboards on large screen TVs, but people are also wanting to take their data with them and be mobile with their data. Like, for example, access their data from an iPad or any kind of a mobile tablet type device, whether it's a Droid or an Apple. But here you see an example, again, of some different ways of how we can take our data with us and be mobile, access my information right from a tablet, interact with my system right from a tablet device. Notice here, I'll show you another example, in this case using an iPhone. So again, lots of mobile capabilities available to you with Epicor ERP. Notice here from a phone, maybe I'll go into CRM and access my contact information. So notice from here, I'm accessing my customers. I'm clicking to call right here from my phone, right? I'm clicking to email. These are live customer records right out of my ERP database. Maybe I'm going to click and map and drive to that particular address. Okay. So hopefully everybody's still tracking with me here. Let me close a few screens. And so that gives you a few things to think about and highlights a few things in terms of, what makes Epicor effective in terms of finding information, right? Accessing information. The next concept I want to talk about is this concept of, alerts and automation. And I'm going to bring up an example as we talk about this. This is a key area because inevitably what people want to be able to do is obviously take advantage of the best practice workflow that's built into the system, right? But inevitably what my customers want to be able to do, because everybody's business is unique, they want take advantage of the best practice workflow built into the system and the workflow that comes out of the box. But oftentimes my customers want to augment how the system works out of the box. They want to add certain functionality, right, that might be unique to their business, that maybe didn't come out of the box. And here I want to give you an example. Let's say, for example, in your business, you said, Mike, this discounting of sales orders, is getting out of control for us. And I want to introduce into the system some method of controlling this discount situation. So for example, notice what I've done is I've added some capabilities, and I've actually added a rule on my discount field here. So for example, notice I've said, hey, if you enter a value greater than X, I want you to highlight that discount yellow, right? And give the user some feedback that they've reached a certain threshold, right? And so, 15%, you're getting a warning, but you're able to go through with that. What if the user enters 40%, right? So notice in this case, it says, hey, pops up a message. Are you out of your mind, right? And remember, this isn't something out of the box, right? This is something I added to my system to support my unique business and the way my business functions, right? So I said, you know what? Let's warn the user that they're out of their mind at this stage. But notice the salesman wants to go ahead and push this through, and he wants. Notice I've told the system I want to capture a reason for this discount, and I'm going to put in maybe a not great reason. I lost a bet at golf, right? And I'm going to submit that for approval. Now, the system's going to do a few things. I've introduced this automation to the system, and I've told the system to submit that sales order for approval and put it on hold. So notice the order's indicated that it's on hold pending that approval, right? And so imagine now at this stage, the salesman maybe goes out to lunch, and let's imagine we're the sales manager. Well, the sales manager gets an email, and perhaps he's on the golf course, right, on his phone, and he gets this email that says, hey, requested discount 40%, lost a bet at golf. And he says, really? Okay. Notice he's going to reply right from his phone, and he might say, you know what, I'm going to approve this, but, I'm not going to allow 40%, but I will allow 15%, right? So notice now I'm going to send that. And there's some email automation here. So in addition to kicking off the email, Epicor is also listening for that response. So the fact that he approved that sales order, Epicor is going to understand that, and it's going to take that order off of hold. And notice this discount percent of 40%, it's going to change that back down to 15%. So as I go and refresh my screen here, you notice that the system has been updated, that order's been taken off of hold, that discount percent has been set back to 15%, right? So this gives you, again, an example of, functionality that we've added that did not come out of the box, right? Because as we go through demonstrations, inevitably we constantly get questions, can I make the system do this, right? Can I automate the system? If this happens, can I make it do X, Y, Z? And so basically the short answer is yes. Using what we call business process automation, you can basically, with the tools provided in the system, add features and functions beyond what came out of the box. Okay. So hopefully everybody is still tracking with me here. This next portion of the demo, I'd actually like to highlight a few features and actually go through a quick, quote to sales order to job flow, and basically introduce you to doing an estimate or a quotation in Epicor, converting that right to a sales order. So we'll pull all of our details from our quote right into a sales order. And then all of those quote and sales order details will populate right into a job that we can plan and schedule and release to the floor. So notice I'm going to come right in here to my opportunity quote entry screen. And from here, we can begin to prepare a quote. So notice how I'm just going to come here and hit new quote. We'll add our customer, so I can search and find my customer in the list. I'll plug in my favorite customer here. And then notice as I hit insert, I'm going to start adding my line item details to my quote. And a couple different things I can do here. So for starters, open with part search, right? So, you know, of course, you might have your parts in your item master. So maybe I want my, you know, my DCD part. So notice I'm looking up my parts. Maybe I'm going to plug in a part from my item master, right? So if you're selling a standard item or a standard service, you know, that item might already be in your item master. Notice as I enter my quantities, notice a price might automatically carry in, right? So quoting a standard item is really straightforward and simple. You may even have quantity breaks set up for that, right? And you may even have specific customer pricing that's going to determine, you know, a different price depending on the customer or depending upon the customer group or things of that nature. So notice quoting a simple standard item very quick. I'm going to add a second line item, and I want to really highlight something that sets Epicor apart from the competition, is this concept of part on the fly. This makes Epicor particularly strong in your custom manufacture, engineer to order, you know, make to order. So notice what I can do, and I'm totally just going to make this up. I'm going to call it MIS, you know, Pam Rubley's with us. I'll call it a PR 1000, right? And we'll give it a description. You know, I'll call it an MIS, comma, Pam Rubley part. You know, just totally making this up on the fly, right? This is kind of a big deal because some systems are very inventory centric. They're not going to let you put a part number on the quote until you go put it in the item master first, right? So don't miss what I'm doing here. I'm adding a part on the fly to this quote, and at no point did Epicor force me to go put that in the item master, right? So now I'm contemplating, what should I charge for that particular item, right? I could just come in here and enter a price, or notice I can come down here to the line item details and actually go into the manufacturing details, and notice I can consider the assemblies, the operations, the materials, the method of manufacture that go into this particular part, so that I can use that information to help me figure out a price, right? Help me figure out a cost, labor, material, subcontract, overhead costs, to help me figure out a price. A couple different ways I can populate these assemblies, operations, and materials. My favorite way, one of my favorite ways, is to get the details. So imagine if I say to myself, well, you know what? This part is really similar to a different part that we've manufactured, right? This service is really similar to a similar service we provide, or it's similar to a service or part we've made on a previous job, or it's similar to something we've quoted previously. I'm going to say, you know what? This is really similar to that DCD 100 SP, right? One of my standard parts. And so notice I'm going to say, you know what? Let's pull in the DCD Rev B method of manufacture. Let's pull in those assemblies, operations, and materials. And then I can come in and I can massage those. So notice I might click and delete or change the data within these operations, or I might, you know, click and change the quantity of this material. You know, maybe I change that quantity there, or maybe I want to come here and add a new material. Notice another popular, really powerful feature here, and I'm just making this part number up. Adding a material on the fly. Notice I'm just calling this some material. You know, maybe I think this is going to be $50, but I don't want to spend a lot of time sourcing that because I'm just working on a quote. So notice I've now incorporated a $50, you know, some material cost into that. But notice as I come down to my worksheet, I can now look at my labor costs, my overhead, my material, my subcontract cost, and start to apply a markup and start to figure out a price, right? Start to figure out a price that's going to cover my cost based on my method of manufacture and make enough money for me to have a profit. Okay. Hopefully everybody is still tracking with me. Notice I'm going to come in here and print, fax, email my quote. So here, let me just actually mark these line items as complete real quick. And then I'll mark this as ready to be printed. And you'll notice now I can print, fax, email my quote. Now, when we look at this quote printout, you know, again, this is another example of a report out of a system, right? Epicor comes with over 100 of these reports, quote printouts, invoice printouts, you know, balance sheets, income statements, you know, aging reports, you name it. All these reports can be modified. So, of course, in this case, all of my customers will, you know, incorporate their logo, their address, their branding, you know, and then again, they'll decide how much information they want to share or rearrange how the data is displayed on these printouts. But imagine now I've now provided a quotation for my standard product and my custom make to order Pam Rubley part. And imagine I've submitted this quote off to the customer and they're pleased with that and they're ready to place an order. Notice I'm going to come right here and I'm going to create that sales order. So I'm basically going to take all of the data from my quote and I'm going to populate that right into my sales order. If I have a PO number at this stage, I might capture that. I can check off the items that they're interested in buying. I can update the quantities of those items they're interested in buying. I'm reminded of the quantity breaks and the prices that I had quoted. I'm going to go ahead and create that sales order at this stage. So all of the detail that I've prepared on that quote are going to now pull into my order. So it's now created the sales order. And also, if you look at your quote here, for your quote win-loss purposes, notice it's marked this quote as having been won, right? And if I don't win a quote, I'll mark it lost. So this way we can track our quote win-loss and the status of those quotes. And also notice here I can come and see that that sales order is linked to that particular quote, right? So I'm going to right-click and go open up the sales order. We'll look at the sales order for just a moment. And when you look at this particular sales order, again, notice all of the details from my quote have carried in, so I don't have to rekey anything on the sales order, but if I want to make edits at this stage, I can make edits to the sales order here. One of the things I want to highlight here is as I look at these line item details of the order on the left-hand side is attachments, right? Because what do you generally get when you get an order? You usually get a purchase order from your customer, right? So let's pretend like I've received a purchase order. Now, you know, this could be in my email attachments or in a file folder like you see here, but regardless, wherever that document is, notice you drag it and drop it and attach it to that particular item. So you're going to see these attachments throughout the system. In our case, we're looking at it in the context of a sales order, which again is really useful if you have a purchase order from your customer, attach that purchase order. So you can imagine as I'm reviewing the sales order in my system, I could also review the purchase order and make sure that those two documents jive with one another, right? Now, as I'm reviewing this order, processing this order, at some point I usually want to acknowledge with my customer that I've received their order, I've processed their order. So again, at this stage, I print, fax, email my order acknowledgement, and then for demo purposes, I'll preview it to the screen. But of course, you'll push the email button, it'll prepare the email, it'll attach the PDF and do all of that for you in an automated fashion. But notice the concept is at this stage, I've received your PO, Mr. Customer, right? And I'm acknowledging that I've received your order, I've placed your order in my system, and these are the terms that we've agreed to, right? Now, some of these items on the order may be in stock, like for example, this frame rail that you see on line item number 1, it happens to be available and on hand. So in that case, I might just pick, pack, and ship that, right? And so from here, I could just open my fulfillment workbench, print out my pick slips and send that to the shipping department to pick, pack, and ship. Notice in the case of the Pam Rubley part, it's actually highlighting it red here. That's reminding me that I don't have the inventory to cover that particular part, right? So we're going to have to make that part, and I'm going to treat that as a make to order item. And remember, that part on the fly concept applies here again. This part number is not in my item master. So I was able to quote it, I was able to book it on an order, and at no point am I forced to put that in my item master. Remember, this is a unique Pam Rubley part. I may never sell this part again, right? So maybe there's no value to adding that to my item master. Now, with it being a make-to-order part, I'm going to want to create a job. And so there's a couple different ways I can go about creating the job. I can do the CTP, capable to promise, to create the job. Or here, I'm just going to go ahead and do it the quick way and create the job right here. And so notice in this case, it's created the job to fulfill that sales order line 2. And notice now, if I go to the releases, you'll actually see that job is linked to this particular sales order. So we're going to right click open with, we're going to go open that job. And notice now, you know, when you look at this job, I'm going to right click, I'm going to get those details. Now, remember, we had quoted a particular method of manufacture. So I'm going to pull in those details as we had quoted them. And so notice now on my job, you'll start to see these assemblies, operations, and materials. And so notice what I have here is this material XTV99. So again, it's indicating that we're going to need this material. But remember, this material doesn't exist in the item master. So very, very key thing here that introduces a tremendous amount of flexibility for those make to order, custom manufacturers, the ability to, purchase, receive, track cost, material cost for a part on a job, a part on the fly. And then furthermore, the ability to, track labor, material, subcontract, and overhead costs against a finished good part on the fly. So imagine, at this stage, I'm going to purchase my material. I'm going to issue my material out of inventory, track that material cost. I'm going to plan and schedule and track my labor against these operations, shearing, notching, forming. And so as I complete the operations on this job and issue my materials to the job, I'm going to start accruing, labor cost, overhead cost, subcontract cost, and material cost. Notice here, I'm going to go ahead and print our traveler. So here, real quickly, we'll go ahead and plan the job, we'll release the job, we'll schedule the job. So notice as I release it, it wants me to go ahead and schedule. I'm going to backward schedule for the 6/28 due date. Notice based on that backward schedule, it's going to tell us when we should start the job, right? So I've planned, I've scheduled, I've released my job to the floor, and now I print my job traveler. And in just a moment, when this job traveler comes up, you'll see that the traveler's barcoded, right? So that when I go into my Epicor MES, shop floor data collection, I can barcode scan and my employees can clock in and clock out of this job, clock in and clock out of each of the operations and indicate that they've completed those. I can scan in and out those materials and issue those materials to the job. And ultimately, I'm going to print my production details. So once I've completed the job or as I'm midway through the job, I may want to analyze the cost of those jobs. So earlier in the demonstration, we talked about the job cost exception dashboard. So that's a really good way of analyzing my costs. Here's a little more of a traditional way of looking at it in a printed report. But notice some of the things you're tracking right on this particular job. Estimated setup hours, estimated production hours versus our actual hours, right? And then how efficient were we at meeting or exceeding that estimate? Notice the estimated cost in terms of, labor, overhead, material, subcontract, my estimated cost, my actual cost. And so as I begin to transact against this job and accrue hours and accrue labor and material cost, I'm going to be able to gauge how I'm doing as compared to estimate. managed by exception. And then ultimately, when I complete this job and ship it and invoice it, I'm going to be able to compare my profitability. So I'm going to be able to compare my revenue to my cost. And then remember, early on in the demo, we had done our estimate or our quotation where we had estimated a gross profit margin. So now we're going to be able to estimate or rather compare, our estimated profit loss to our actual profit loss and determine, how accurate our estimate was, and be able to determine, where we did well and where we didn't do well, right? Did we profit mostly on material, mostly on labor, or where in particular did we do well and not so well? Okay. So that's more or less everything that I had scheduled for today, Pam. I think we're just a few minutes early, if that's okay.
Hey, early is not bad. Or we could just go for the full 4 hours, Mike. What do you think? All right, let me check the chat room. I'm just kidding. Everyone's going, oh my gosh, maybe, no. So let me.
Maybe there's some questions.
Right, are you ready?
But also, I want to make one other point before we wrap up. I just want to point out, Pam, notice the help over here, the table of contents. And the other thing I wanted to point out before we sign off is this knowledge on demand and the embedded education. So just notice, we're putting a lot of effort into putting a lot of our training materials on recorded video presentations. And a lot of our customers are loving this, right? Where you can actually watch a short, 2-minute video on how to do something. So really, really nice, getting wonderful feedback from our customers. And then also a lot of our customers are really getting a lot of value out of our embedded education. So this takes our help material a step further, where you can actually launch this coursework and actually walk through actual workshops, open up the screens and go through workshops to actually perform the functions right within the system. So there's really wonderful tools built in to basically allow you to learn about your system and get the most value out of it. But I'll let you, Pam, see if there's any questions for us on the chat.
So a couple things. The embedded education does come in very handy when it comes to an implementation. So a lot of our consultants will say, okay, before you even open email in the morning, please spend 15 minutes in the AP embedded education, because he or she are going to help you implement that portion of Epicor software. Also in regards to that, let's say you have turnover and new employees come in, or you add employees, that embedded education is there for ongoing training as well. So Mike, we have one question, and let's see if you got this one, or if I can read it, it's so small. When he updated data in the grid, did those changes auto-save? As I didn't see him hit some sort of save or record button.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I actually did hit the save button. So yeah, what you typically want to do is you want to kind of make your changes like this, right? And then you may not have caught it, but I came over here and I hit that save button to apply those updates. Okay. So hopefully that answers that. And if there's any other questions.
Sounds like it did. Are there any other questions that we can address? I think we're good right now, Mike. I do want to thank you for your time. I want to thank everybody else for their time. We know how passionate we are about Epicor, and we definitely enjoy sharing it with those that are interested as well. So we will follow up individually with each one of you. And with that, I'd like to conclude the session. Thanks again, Mike, and everybody that joined us. I hope you have a great day. Bye.
My pleasure. Take care, everyone.